In everyone's life, there are moments when loneliness feels particularly acute. It's a strange, almost unnatural feeling, as if something has gone wrong in the very fabric of the universe. We are born into a world full of people, yet at times we find ourselves isolated, as if the universe has turned its back on us. The silence becomes deafening, and the emptiness unbearable. But what if this loneliness is not a coincidence, but part of a larger plan, the purpose of which is not yet clear? Carl Jung, the eminent psychologist, believed that periods of isolation are not mere coincidences, but important stages on the path to self-discovery. The universe is not punishing, but rebuilding a person. The question is how one responds to it, with resistance or acceptance. Initially, isolation is perceived as rejection. Loneliness is associated with failure, with a feeling of abandonment. Watching others succeed in relationships, enjoy the company of friends, and seem carefree, the question arises, why me? What have I done to deserve this? However, Jung had a different view. He believed that those who are destined for something great are often alone, not because they are unworthy of companionship, but because their path requires it. These periods of profound solitude are not punishment, but an invitation to explore those aspects of the personality that remain hidden in the hustle and bustle of everyday life. Most people fear loneliness because it forces them to confront their true selves, but those who embrace it discover something amazing. What exactly? This is something that everyone who dares to look deep within themselves must find out. Throughout human history, outstanding minds, whether philosophers, artists, scientists, or spiritual mentors, have invariably gone through periods of deep solitude. Think of Buddha, who, sitting alone under the Bodhi tree, spent years struggling with his thoughts. Even Carl Jung, seeking to understand the secrets of the human psyche, went into deep introspection. The reason for this is that true changes do not occur in noisy halls, but in quiet, often uncomfortable spaces where a person remains alone with themselves. The universe deliberately isolates those who are destined for awakening, immersing them in a state where external stimuli disappear and the process of self-discovery begins. If a person feels lost and detached from the world, perhaps this is not a sign of rejection, but preparation for something greater, for a revelation that can only come in solitude. However, here lies the complexity. Most people cannot withstand the test of isolation, succumbing to despair and mistakenly believing that loneliness is tantamount to being unwanted. But as Jung would argue, this is the greatest of illusions. Loneliness is not a curse, but a gateway leading to something deeper. The question is how a person uses this time for self-discovery, personal growth, and becoming something greater, or allows the silence to consume them. The universe provides this moment not by chance, and how a person chooses to use it will determine their future destiny. In moments of solitude, a person's inner world gains amazing power. The surrounding bustle and familiar distractions disappear, and then the mind comes face to face with thoughts that were previously carefully avoided. It is at this stage that many people experience difficulties, as the mind begins to reproduce past failures, tormenting doubts and insecurities. It feels as if you are drowning in the abyss of your own consciousness. However, according to Jung, this process is important. He called it individuation, a complex and necessary path to finding one's true self. Often people live lives full of contradictions, where their personality is shaped by the expectations of others and social norms. But in isolation, these external factors lose their power, exposing the true, unfiltered essence of a person. This experience can be painful, but it is the only way to achieve genuine self-awareness. The feeling of unbearable isolation arises from the need to confront what a person has long been running away from. These may be old emotional wounds or the realization that the chosen path in life does not actually correspond to their true desires. In the absence of external distractions, the subconscious begins to speak, and, as Jung believed, this confrontation with oneself is the basis for personal growth. Many people seek to avoid this experience by resorting to social networks, relationships, or constant activity. However, those who find the strength to withstand this test, who remain alone with their thoughts and do not run away from them, are transformed. The feeling of isolation is not punishment, but rather a process of liberation and renewal. However, many people succumb to despondency and despair at this very moment. Instead of seeing solitude as an opportunity for self-discovery and growth, they mistakenly perceive it as a sign of rejection and disapproval. They begin to doubt themselves, convincing themselves that they are not worthy of communication and intimacy with others. This is the main danger of isolation, not loneliness itself, but the misconception that it will last forever. As Jung warned, excessive identification with one's suffering can be devastating. Of course, loneliness hurts, but this pain is not an enemy, but a valuable teacher. The more a person resists it, the more it dominates them. But if he accepts it, if he immerses himself in silence, he will begin to hear something beyond that silence, his true inner voice. People who emerge from a period of isolation enriched with wisdom and strength are those who have realized its true purpose. They do not consider themselves victims of loneliness, but see themselves as its students. They use this time for deep reflection, to get rid of socially imposed stereotypes and reconnect with their inner world. That is why many visionaries, mystics, and geniuses strive to spend time alone, because isolation is not an empty and barren space, but a kind of passage, a rite of initiation that distinguishes those who simply exist from those who truly live. Sometimes it seems that a person is left alone with life's difficulties, but what if this is not oblivion, but a test of strength? History knows many examples of outstanding personalities who have gone through periods of profound isolation. They were deprived of their usual comfort, torn from society, and forced to face themselves face to face. And this is not accidental, but a kind of rite of initiation. The universe does not give out wisdom for nothing. It requires proof that a person is worthy of it, and loneliness becomes the first serious test. Unfortunately, most people do not pass this exam. They allow bitterness and resentment to overwhelm them, believing that life is unfair to them. They waste precious moments of solitude on self-pity, passively waiting for the world to come to their aid. However, Carl Jung was convinced that those who seek the truth must steadfastly endure the discomfort of loneliness. Why? Because only in solitude can one truly know oneself. Without the influence of others, without the distractions of everyday life, a person is forced to face the harsh reality of their existence. If you are going through a period of isolation, it is important to realize the universe has not abandoned you. It is watching you, waiting for your reaction. Will you waste time on fruitless regrets about the past, or will you use it for personal growth and development? This is what will determine whether loneliness breaks you or becomes a catalyst for awakening. Those who successfully pass this test become stronger, gain deep self-awareness, and prepare for the next stage of their life path. But those who resist loneliness, who try to run away from it, only prolong their suffering. A person is always given a choice to view their own solitude as a punishment or as a unique purpose. In moments of loneliness, it is worth asking yourself, what lessons is the universe trying to teach? What aspects of one's own personality have been neglected? What truths has one been afraid to touch? Carl Jung, an outstanding psychologist, argued that the answers to these questions are found only in the silence of solitude. That is why the universe isolates those whom it intends to transform, because only those who are brave enough to face themselves face to face are capable of true transformation. There is something in loneliness that eludes the understanding of most. It not only exposes the true essence of a person, but also forges something new from them. When the world quiets down, when distractions disappear, what remains? At first, it feels like a gaping void, like non-existence. However, it is in this void that something new is born, something previously unknown. Jung believed that in the depths of the unconscious lies a version of a person untouched by social norms, expectations, or fears. This is the authentic self, buried under the weight of external influences, and the only path to it lies through solitude. In the modern world, where information and entertainment flow in a continuous stream, true solitude is becoming an increasingly rare and valuable resource. The constant presence of social media, television, and other stimuli creates a noise barrier that prevents a person from looking inside themselves and knowing their true feelings. However, it is in silence and solitude that true personal growth is born. Carl Jung, an outstanding Swiss psychologist and philosopher, viewed loneliness not as a burden, but as a unique opportunity to penetrate the depths of the unconscious. This is a special space where innermost thoughts, hidden desires, and deep-seated fears come to the surface, allowing a person to meet themselves face to face. Unfortunately, many people avoid this experience, fearing what they might find in the depths of their psyche. However, those who find the courage to embrace solitude rather than run from it discover extraordinary horizons of self-discovery. Consider the great spiritual traditions of the world: monks retreating to mountains for meditation, prophets wandering through deserts in search of revelation, sages spending years in silence. All of them sought isolation, not for the sake of suffering, but to uncover a deeper truth. Jung asserted that within each person lies a vast power, transcending the boundaries of the individual I. It is a connection to something beyond the material world, to the so-called collective unconscious. The collective unconscious is a vast reservoir of universal human wisdom, archetypes and symbols shared by all humanity and passed down through generations. And it is solitude, according to Jung, that unlocks access to this inexhaustible source of wisdom and understanding. However, solitude is not merely a moment of self-knowledge, it is an active process of self-creation. In isolation, one loses the ability to rely on anyone but oneself, and it is in this situation that inner resilience is forged. One learns to think independently, to trust one's inner feelings unconditionally, transforming into the architect of one's own soul. The vast majority of people live their lives passively reacting to external circumstances. They constantly seek approval, validation of their significance, and guidance from others. But those who consciously embrace solitude discover something truly invaluable. They no longer need the world to define their essence, because they already possess a clear understanding of who they truly are. And so a person finds themselves alone, striving to find meaning in the surrounding silence. At first glance this may seem unbearable, but what if it is the beginning of something truly profound and meaningful? Carl Jung, the eminent psychologist, believed that each person possesses a unique destiny, their own individual life path. However, most people never find it because they are overly absorbed in worldly bustle and entangled in the web of societal expectations. The universe deliberately places a person in isolation to force them to turn inward, to listen to the voice that has long been drowned out by external noise. Initially, solitude may be perceived as imprisonment, but those who endure this state long enough begin to see its true essence. A gateway opening the path to a life governed not by fear, not by the pursuit of conformity, and not by an incessant need for external approval. Jung spoke of the process of individuation, a complex and fascinating journey toward becoming one's most authentic self. But this journey is not for the faint of heart. It requires considerable courage, a determination to walk through life alone, to embrace uncertainty, and to believe that silence holds the answers to the most profound questions. The harsh reality is that the vast majority of people are unable to comprehend the depth of another person's experiences. They readily offer advice: pull yourself together, move on, be like everyone else. But perhaps ordinary existence is not destined to be the lot of some. Otherwise, why would the universe bring them to this moment of reflection? The universe does not isolate those who are meant to dissolve into the faceless mass. It isolates those who are called to awaken. The universe casts aside everything familiar, forcing a person to face themselves so that they can find strength and wisdom. In this regard, a logical question arises: how to manage solitude? Will the individual resist it, fight it, try to escape from it, or will they embrace it, carefully listen to its lessons, and use it as a springboard to transform into the person they are destined to become? The choice remains with each individual, but it should be remembered, the universe makes no mistakes. If a person is currently alone, then it is meant to be, and further actions will determine their fate. In an era of unprecedented interconnectedness, when communication with someone on the other side of the globe occurs in an instant, loneliness has reached unprecedented proportions. Depression, anxiety, an all-consuming sense of emptiness have become the scourge of modernity. Why is this happening? If ubiquitous connection were a panacea, wouldn't everyone feel happy and fulfilled? Carl Jung argued that most people are not truly connected, they are merely distracting themselves. They surround themselves with others not out of genuine closeness, but out of fear of being alone with themselves. They chase after validation, approval, a sense of belonging, anything to avoid silence. But in doing so, they renounce the only connection that has genuine meaning, the connection with themselves. Carl Jung believed that the vast majority of human relationships are based on deception and self-deception. Individuals, like actors on a stage, put on masks, perform carefully learned roles, and hide their true selves in the vain hope of earning recognition and approval from others. However, such connections, devoid of sincerity and depth, are extremely unreliable. They are based on fleeting impressions, superficial interactions, and a deep-seated fear of being exposed, of appearing before others in their true light. This is why many people, even when surrounded by others, experience a crushing sense of loneliness. Their true essence remains unseen and misunderstood, and even more tragically, they themselves do not realize who they truly are. The tragedy lies in the fact that most never find the strength to break out of this vicious cycle of illusions. They spend their lives in fruitless attempts to fill the inner void, jumping from one superficial relationship to another, from one distraction to another, in a desperate attempt to escape themselves. Isolation, paradoxically, can shatter this fragile world of illusions, forcing a person to face harsh reality. When an individual is left alone with themselves, there is no one to perform for, no need to wear a mask and pretend to be someone they are not. They are left alone with the naked truth of who they really are. For many, this becomes a true revelation which horrifies them. It is much easier to continue living in a world of distractions and entertainment, finding temporary solace in empty and meaningless relationships, avoiding the deep and sometimes painful work of self-knowledge and self-analysis. However, those who stubbornly resist this truth only prolong their suffering and exacerbate their inner turmoil. They remain forever trapped in a cycle of superficial connections, never finding true peace of mind and never unlocking their true potential. This is the paradox of human existence. True unity becomes accessible only to those who have mastered the art of solitude. Only deep self-knowledge and awareness of one's own fears and aspirations, strengths and vulnerabilities allows for building relationships based on sincerity and mutual respect. Only by freeing oneself from the fear of loneliness does one gain the ability to interact with others without dissolving into them or losing one's own identity. The universe, like a wise mentor, protects us from imaginary connections, from illusions and the insatiable thirst for external approval, not for the purpose of punishment, but for the purpose of liberation. Only by ceasing to depend on others in gaining a sense of wholeness do we become capable of true intimacy. There comes a moment when the silence of loneliness ceases to be peaceful and becomes unbearable. The emptiness feels like an abyss, ready to swallow one's entire being. In spiritual traditions, this state is known as the dark night of the soul, a period of deep suffering when all previous beliefs collapse. It is like death, and in a sense it is. However, as Jung argued, this death is necessary. It is the death of the false self, a personality formed from fears, expectations, and illusory control. Only by allowing this false self to die can one be reborn into something greater, into the authentic self. At this stage of life, many people experience a deep crisis, succumb to despair, and lose faith in the meaning of existence, believing that they will never be able to escape the darkness. Depression, nihilistic sentiments, and a sense of hopelessness lie in wait for a person in this dark night of the soul. However, as Jung noted, These sufferings are not the final point, but represent a transitional period, a kind of destruction of all that is false and superficial that has accumulated within the personality, freeing up space for the emergence of something fundamentally new. Those who successfully overcome this difficult process undergo radical changes, becoming almost unrecognizable compared to their former state. They are transformed, freed from the shackles of illusions, and reborn with a new, clear vision of the world, which is available to only a few. It is worth admitting that going through this stage is associated with enormous difficulties. Most people resist clinging to the familiar self, to established patterns of thinking and behavior. They seek salvation in distractions, addictions, and any other ways to avoid emotional pain. However, the only path to healing lies through full immersion in this process. It is necessary to allow the old version of oneself to die, to abandon everything that no longer brings benefits, everything that was built on fear rather than on true values. This is what Jung called individuation, a painful but absolutely necessary process of becoming the authentic self. In this current period of life, it is important to realize what is happening is not fading away, but transformation. The universe deliberately shields you from everything superfluous, from everything that doesn't reflect your true essence. And while the experiences may seem unbearable, behind them lies something exceptional, a new version of yourself, possessing strength, wisdom, and freedom from past delusions. The so-called dark night of the soul is not the end, but a prelude to something grand. Perhaps isolation is not accidental, but a deliberate preparation. Carl Jung asserted that every person has a unique purpose, yet many fail to find it, distracted by extraneous factors and the expectations of others. The universe doesn't subject you to isolation for no reason. It refines, shapes, and prepares you for future achievements. It's no coincidence that many outstanding thinkers and leaders have experienced periods of profound loneliness. This is not a sign of weakness, but a stage of preparation for something greater. History knows many geniuses, such as Jung, Buddha, and Tesla, whose fates were marked by the seal of loneliness, rejection, and suffering. However, these trials did not break them, but became the crucible in which their spirit was tempered. They embraced their solitude, allowing it to sharpen their minds and strengthen their wills, turning pain into wisdom and isolation into a source of strength. The universe does not waste suffering and does not condemn to loneliness those who do not carry potential within them. Isolation is the lot of the chosen, those destined for greatness. But unfortunately, most people do not realize this. They waste precious moments of solitude on regrets about the past and fruitless anticipation of a miracle. They see isolation as a curse, not a call to action, thereby missing a unique opportunity for self-improvement. The main question is how the reader will act. Will they waste this time or use it for personal growth? Will they perceive their loneliness as excruciating suffering or as a prelude to something extraordinary? The universe did not provide this moment by chance. The reader is called to transform, to become something greater than they are now. But this will only happen if they accept this process, stop resisting it, and believe that isolation is not the end of the road, but only its beginning. The most difficult truth to grasp about isolation is that this path must be walked alone. No one can pave it for you. No one can give ready-made answers or relieve you of difficulties, and that is the essence. The famous psychologist Jung believed that genuine transformation cannot be bestowed. It must be earned. That is why the universe places a person in conditions of isolation. Only alone can they develop the strength of spirit, wisdom, and confidence necessary to realize their potential. Many people spend their lives waiting for a guide to show them the direction. They seek teachers, mentors, saviors, but the harsh truth is that no one can do this work for them. The deepest lessons, the most important revelations, and the most significant changes come only from within. That is why solitude is so necessary. It forces a person to become their own guide. In such moments, there is a strong desire to return to comfort and avoid the unpleasant sensations associated with being alone with oneself. But if you give in to this impulse, you will never be able to fully unlock your potential. The universe bestows this loneliness as a valuable gift. The only question is whether a person can accept it. Most people spend their lives running away from themselves, filling their days with noise, distractions, and a constant search for validation from the outside. They do everything possible to avoid silence, because in this silence they will have to face the frightening truth about who they really are. The universe, like a wise mentor, has a unique gift: to dispel the veil of illusions, confronting a person with circumstances that seem to bring only destruction. However, behind this painful process lies a deep purpose: to allow the personality to be reborn, to acquire a new, more perfect form. Isolation, which many perceive as punishment, is actually a stage of preparation, tempering the spirit and making it invincible. Reflections on such phenomena as the illusory nature of relationships, the false self, the thorny path of transformation, and the dark night of the soul lead to the realization of a fundamental truth. A person is not who they used to think they were. The personality they desperately clung to, the former image of themselves, was only a reflection of external influences, fears, and social expectations. Now there is a painful process of destruction of this construction, but it is this that opens the way for the emergence of a new version of yourself, stronger, wiser, and free from illusions. The famous psychologist Carl Jung viewed isolation as a gateway to individuation, to the process of becoming a whole and self-sufficient personality. However, as life shows, only a few reach this stage. Most people resist solitude, perceiving transformation as suffering rather than a priceless gift. As a result, they find themselves trapped in endless cycles of distraction, never unlocking their true potential. But for those who have realized the true nature of what is happening, isolation ceases to be meaningless. They understand that it is a catalyst for their improvement, destroying the old to make way for the new. For an individual to transform into something beyond their current state, they face a dilemma: whether to embrace this opportunity and allow themselves to be transformed, or to stubbornly resist change, seeking refuge in cozy but illusory comfort. The decision remains with the individual. And here is the undeniable truth: if they decide to accept this process, if they fully surrender to the feeling of loneliness, something extraordinary happens. A transformation begins that surpasses the wildest expectations. Unshakable inner strength is cultivated, allowing one to become someone who no longer needs external approval. The individual ceases to seek validation from others, quench the thirst for superficial connections, and allow fear to control their actions. They become a rare phenomenon, an individual possessing true freedom. That is why only a few manage to achieve genuine self-realization. The price that must be paid is solitude, the necessity of facing oneself without distractions or attempts to escape. It means delving into the depths of one's own mind and accepting everything that is found there. This process is painful. It destroys the former personality before recreating it anew. But if the individual can withstand this test, if they embrace it, they emerge from it undefeated. Looking around, one can notice those who never dared to embark on the journey of self-discovery. Their gazes betray a hidden fear, inner insecurity, and the quiet desperation of those who never got to know themselves. They hide from themselves behind fleeting hobbies, superficial relationships, and carefully constructed masks. They are frightened by the prospect of being alone with themselves, because deep down they realize that they are strangers to themselves. But this is not the fate of those chosen for something greater. Now is the time to use the time and solitude provided. One should stop resisting it and resenting it, and instead ask oneself, what is the universe trying to teach? Who must I become? What illusions must I let go of? If one delves into these questions and completes this process, one can emerge transformed. One will become someone who no longer fears solitude, because they will discover the true power hidden within them. And here is the final truth. Once having gone through this transformation, one will never be the same. What once held one back, whether it was the judgments of others, the need for approval, or the fear of being rejected, will no longer have power. One will be liberated in a way that most people cannot understand, and this is the deepest gift that the universe can bestow. Everyone faces a vital choice, whether to accept their destiny and allow solitude to forge them into the person they are meant to be, or to stubbornly resist change, remaining trapped in old illusions. If one is ready to embark on this transformative journey, one should begin immediately. The first step on this path is accepting the current state of affairs, realizing that the loneliness being experienced is not a tragic end, but rather the beginning of something grand, surpassing the wildest expectations. It is in moments of solitude and self-reflection that new horizons and opportunities for personal growth open up.